Alex Honnold, welcome to Ireland. How are you finding it?
Oh, I'm really tired. I mean, it's amazing. It's beautiful. It's like a really nice place. It's cool climbing.
Did you know a lot about Fairhead before you came here, or is this all new to you?
I knew nothing about Fairhead, except that it was universally praised. Everybody's like, oh, Fairhead, you're gonna love it. It's great. It's like really cool. It's really, great climbing. And I was like, all right. And then we showed up and it was like, yeah, cool.
So before we move on about Ireland, can we talk about slate climbing in Wales? Because I think it's so cool that you've been slate climbing in Wales. What did you think of Welsh slate?
I was stoked on the slate. I've always wanted to climb on slate. I grew up, with the history of it, like hearing the very big and the very small, and the Quarrymen and Johnny Dawes on slate. And so I'd always known the history of slate climbing, and I just always wanted to try it. And there aren't that many places in the world that are fully unique, in the way that slate is. Like, I don't know if there's anywhere where you can climb on completely smooth, glassy walls with just disgustingly small crimps like the way you can on the slate.
I mean, yesterday you were climbing stuff with ropes all day, and yet we're talking about your solos. Does that frustrate you?
It used to bother me a little more with everyone just wants to talk about soloing, but soloing probably makes up 5% of my total climbing or something. And it makes sense because soloing is the most dramatic, it's the most visually exciting, soloing's interesting, I see it and I'm like, that looks cool.
Yeah.
I mean, just seeing a lonely figure on a face by himself, you're like, oh, that looks pretty full on.
I suppose it's the psychological aspect of it that people sometimes don't understand. I don't understand it, is how you can have that mentality, that confidence in yourself.
I mean, surely there's a grade at which you'd be like, there's no chance I'm gonna fall off this, and it feels comfortable. It's funny to me that soloing is such a big thing in the UK and Ireland, because the thing is, anyone lead climbing here is soloing to some extent some of the time, because that's just the nature of trad climbing in the UK and Ireland. It's just if you're head pointing all these E7s, E8s, all that kind of stuff, I mean, it's like you are soloing for sections of the route most of the time. I mean, the thing with soloing is that basically before you do a big hard solo, you just have to have your mind wrapped around it. You have to be ready for it. You have to visualize the moves and sort of be psychologically prepared for it and whatever. And so sometimes that means that you spend the day before consciously thinking about it a ton and trying to remember sequences and think about foot placements. Sometimes you will have spent 3 months beforehand thinking about that stuff, and so then when the time comes, you just sleep like a baby and go and do it. It just depends on where you are in the process. But generally the starting is the harder part, and then once you sort of get into the rhythm. I noticed that yesterday, I saw on Complete Scream, starting up was sort of intimidating. Going through the first crux or two is a little oh, I'm not sure. And then by the end, you're just whatever, I'm climbing, I feel comfortable, it's totally fine. I find that the higher I climb, the more I start to trust my feet and relax into it, and so then it makes the climbing quite a bit more enjoyable.
Do you have quite a strong ethical code when you climb? For you, because rock climbing is full of ethics and opinions.
No, I don't have any kind of ethical code. I don't give a shit. I think all that stuff is I'm all about choose your own adventure, do whatever. I mean, I would be stoked if everything was bolted, basically.
Yeah.
Because I'm basically all about access, make something convenient, make it fun. I just want to climb. I kind of hate having to deal with all the trad stuff and making anchors out of tying off boulders on the top of a cliff. I'm like, why not just have a nice bolted anchor, lower back to the ground, have a picnic, all tranquilo. I love European sport crag style, because you can just climb so much that way and it's so easy. No, I mean, I don't have any particular problem with head pointing, and that is basically how I'm doing most of my soloing. I basically rehearse something and then feel comfortable on it and then solo it. I do think it's sort of silly to put up really bold routes as head points. Well, in some ways I think it's sort of silly, because it's you're gonna put up a route that people can just come up and climb. Or if you're gonna put up a really, really bold route, do it in really bold style where you just go up there and have some crazy adventure. But I just feel it's silly to put 2 weeks of work memorizing all the moves, doing it perfectly, and then leaving this route that nobody's allowed to alter because you've now done the first ascent, but that everyone else has to put 2 weeks effort into to actually do. I don't know, I mean, maybe that's cool, but I'm just why not leave it as a sport route, and then if you want to do it on gear, or if you want to solo it, then you can,
The Honnold Foundation and the environment issues that you care about, as climbers as a community, what can we do to help, do you think?
I don't know if the climbing community should even necessarily identify with, I feel it's more as an individual, you should look at what are your biggest impacts, what are the easiest ways to change those.
You travel a lot, you spend your life kind of going around the world. Does it get lonely?
No, not that lonely. I mean, I'm generally climbing with friends, here at Fairhead, one of my good friends from the States is climbing with me for 4 days, and then we're both gonna reconvene in Switzerland, and my girlfriend's joining me in France, and then spending 2 months sport climbing in Switzerland with me. I mean, the climbing community is like such a nice scene all over the world that it's always like pretty homey.
Alex Honnold, thank you so much for spending the time talking to us.
My pleasure.